Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that really helps to get my channel promoted, and I appreciate that a lot. I'd also love it if you left a comment. It's really nice to get such nice comments from you all, and I like video idea suggestions. I like constructive criticism. If you want to tell me how you do things, that's always interesting to find out. Or if you just have a question, feel free to leave it in the comment section. So a lot of times with turquoise you see it done in southwestern styles only, and so I thought today I would do something that's kind of angular and more contemporary with a piece of turquoise, just as an experiment. We'll see how it turns out. I hope you like it. I think it'll be cool, but we'll see. Before we get started, I need to thank some groups of people. First off, I'd like to thank my patrons over on Patreon. I have a new one, BJ. Thanks for signing up to my Patreon. I hope that you spend some time getting to know some of the people over there. I think you'll find that there's a group of really nice people with a lot of knowledge and who are willing to share it. So I really enjoy my interactions with that group, and they've created this really nice community. So thanks to all of you, including BJ. So. The other group is my YouTube subscribers, and we are getting very close to 15,000. We're at 14,900 and some last I looked. That's amazing. I can't believe that we've gotten there. I'm very excited about that. I would point out though that there's 85,000 left until I get one of those plaques that I can put behind me. That's a YouTube button plaque, so tell your friends. But thank you for being my YouTube subscribers. I really do appreciate the nice comments and the financial contributions like the Buy Me a Coffee and the Super Thanks. That really helps a lot with the cost of materials right now because they're kind of expensive. So, all right, well, with those things being said, let's get started on this project. This is one of my design idea books. Of late I have started putting some conversion charts on the back as well as some other information, so check those out. This one has fractions of an inch to decimals to millimeters, and I've been trying to use the metric system more often, so it's good for me to have those handy. The other thing that's handy about these is the little grid pattern in the background, and that allows for me, who's not terribly good at sketching things, to keep things sort of symmetrical a little better than if I just freehanded them. So these are available, like I said, on my merch store, so get yourself one or two of these. So here's what I'm going to do today. Here's a little turquoise. It's kind of sort of almost egg-shaped, and it's kind of a little bit greenish, a little bit sky blue on one side. I'm not sure where this is from, but it strikes me as Arizona or Nevada. Any turquoise experts out there could tell me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a ring that has a head and a shank, and the shank is going to look like this with kind of a contemporary pattern. I'm kind of doing it like I did a bracelet a while back with just square wire and then round wire in the middle. Or I think the bracelet I did square wire throughout the whole thing. But this one I'm going to use 18 gauge round in the middle, 14 gauge square on the sides. I think that'll give it kind of a geometric look. I like the kite kind of shape that I've used in a few other things, and so I'm going to make the surface of this kite shaped. I'm going to use 22 gauge sheet underneath and a border of 16 gauge square on the edge. And I don't oxidize things very often, but I have some that gel liver of sulfur stuff, and we're going to give that a try today and see how it comes out. If I don't like it, I'll just polish it back away. But we'll see, because turquoise really looks good when it stands out against black and silver together, so we'll see how that turns out. But I think that'll look nice. So let's get started on a bezel for this. I'm going to use 3/16 inch fine silver bezel strip. That is 4.76 millimeters. I'm using 26 gauge, which equates to 0.41 millimeters, I think. The 14 gauge is for the band is 1.6 millimeters. This 18 gauge round is 1.02 millimeters, if I remember right. And the 16 gauge for the border here is 1.3 millimeters. 22 gauge sheet is 0.66 millimeters thick for those those of you who are across the seas. Alright, so let's start by making a bezel for this little guy. Being kind of a tall bezel, I will definitely file this down a little bit. I just have a tendency to keep one type around. Boy, it's really starting to feel like fall around here. I went out this morning to take the trash out to the curb, and I was surprised. I had to come back and get my jacket. Must be autumn. That's pretty snug. Let's see if we can make a nice mark there and cut that off. We've started putting together 2024's tutorial guide, which should be available shortly after the beginning of the year, or maybe even a little bit right at the end of the year. If you haven't seen my 2023 one, that has links to all of the tutorials from 2023, along with pictures and information about the project, including raw materials, my difficulty rating that I'd give it, and some notes about things I noticed when I was doing it, things I realized or might have done different had I had a second chance to do it. And whether it was just a fun project or whether it was a grind. Okay. If you're interested in that one, that is available now, and that's right up there if you want to get a hold of that. It's a good way to get to a whole bunch of videos and have it right at your fingertips. Alrighty. If you haven't been to my channel before, I use hard silver sheet solder for almost everything. And I use a liquid flux that I dribble on for the most part, although I do have a spray bottle that I use occasionally. My torch is a Silversmith model, which is their acetylene air version. It draws in air right through these little holes here, so you don't need an oxygen tank. It doesn't get as hot as an oxyacetylene torch, but you generally don't really need that much heat for silversmithing anyway. Looks like I have a couple pieces of solder here right now, so we'll just get this fluxed and solder it together. If you're new to this, bezels don't take very much time to solder because there's not much metal there. So it's pretty easy to melt them at first. You got to really pay attention when that solder flows. You don't want to stick around too much longer with the heat. Otherwise your bezel will start to pull apart and leave a little gap on either side generally. And people will make fun of your gap on your bezel. Nobody wants that. They'd say, wow, you make such beautiful jewelry. Why is there a big crack going down the side though? Although I do have a video on how to fix that, so if you're interested in that, I'll put a link up there. That happens a lot when you're a beginner. Or it did to me anyway. Size-wise, I think we're pretty good. As long as that, I got to be careful I don't push down too hard because it's close, and you could chip that a little bit if I'm not careful. I get a little impatient sometimes and push too hard and then break a stone. That's always a bummer. Okay, now let me find my 22 gauge sheet. So I got some 22 gauge sheet here. I have some 16 gauge square wire that I made from some 14, that's why it's oxidized a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use two pieces, and I already marked this one with a Sharpie where it's going to bend here, and I filed a notch there so I can bend it sharply, and then these two ends will file to match up nicely. So this one, I made a mark on it. Notice that I left a little extra here because I want to have some extra space to work with, so I don't, in case I don't quite get my groove right where I want it to be. But I'm just going to use the corner of my file right in that spot and file a little notch in there. I don't have to get too crazy because I'm not doing that steep of an angle. It's almost a 90, it looks like. But okay, try and do the same thing on this one. I want these to be pretty exact as far as matching each other, otherwise it'll be wonky looking. I want to have a wonky ring. Let's see how symmetrical my drawing was now, because these are pretty close. That's pretty good. So let's do this. I'll get this one lined up. Use my marker here to make it so I have something I can scratch a line through. Cut those off and file those and see how it looks. Actually, you know what? Before we do that, no, let's cut those off first. I'm not going to cut them right on the line because I want to be able to file them down a little bit. Okay, so now, before I do anything else, now I'm going to solder that space where I created a little slot to make sure it stays permanent. So I'm going to cut a little bit more solder, just smaller pieces. So you could just set a little piece on there if you want. I have a tendency to do pick soldering, which is where I pick up a little piece like this after I flux the silver. And then just go ahead and place my solder where I want it to go, like that. This is one of those skills that really ramped up my abilities, so if you're interested in learning how to do that, I have a pretty good video about it. I'll link up there for you. Now I should, if I lay this on here, that should give me a pretty close approximation of the original one. me get these, make sure these are sitting nice and flat and are straight and everything. My eyeballs tell me that that's right. We'll see. Okay, I cleaned it up a little bit with the file. And I'm going to cut it off the corner here on the 22 gauge sheet. So one mark there, one mark there. Make sure this is pretty flat when I solder this down. So since I don't, if I'm going to have this centered in there like that, and I'm going to oxidize that space around it, when you oxidize stuff, if you have a lot of solder mess, it's not going to oxidize evenly. And so we're going to do our best to keep any kind of solder mess from that flat surface on the inside, which means that we solder this piece down and we're going to lean the pieces on the outside edge and try not to have any flow much inside. And when we solder this in, after we do the first one, we'll put the solder on the inside of this, so with the hopes that we don't get a lot of flow out to the outside, and we shouldn't get too much. So. Let's lean a piece there. Oopsie. Add a little bit more on this side just to be safe. I don't want a lot of excess, but I do want it to be soldered down all the way around. It looks pretty good so far. Okay, let's cut that off. Excess. You can use your saw if you prefer sawing to this. Probably going to have to round this point a little bit, maybe this one too, just so it's not so lethal. That might help me to get this placed a little better. Okay, and like I said, I'm going to put the solder on the inside on this one. which is what I generally do with bezels anyway, but especially in this kind of a situation where you don't want, any solder mess in that recessed area. I think we're good. Alright, so I'm going to pickle that, and in the meantime, we'll start working on this band. I sized it to be like an 8, 8.5, somewhere in that range. And I cut some 14 gauge. So let's straighten this out. You can use your miter vise jig if you want to on this. If you have one of those are handy tools. I think that's going to have to be good enough. Let me cut myself some, or is this 18? I have a piece of 18 right here. Okay. So I think we just work our way from one end to another. You know what, though, I may do one at either end just to make sure that they stay the same distance apart. I think that might be a wise choice. So get this one soldered over here like this, and I'm going to have to kind of eyeball these angles a little bit. One thing you can do when you're cutting little pieces like this and you want the file angle that you just created to stay and not roll around like this, if you just bend it a little bit like that, you can't really roll then anymore as much. Oopsie. It's quite a bit more mass on the square wire piece here, so I'm going to spend more time heating that than I am the little fine 18 gauge wire, because it takes longer for that to hit the 1450 degrees that it takes to melt hard silver solder. This is one of those situations where pick soldering is handy, not necessarily required, but it definitely allows you to carefully place some stuff rather than counting on balancing. Edge to edge, that's 11 millimeters. So let's make sure this is. That's pretty close, just like that. Right there. I was originally going to make this a complete ring and solder the two ends together, but I'm not sure. I may do a 3/4 and solder the ends of the wires to the back of the bezel instead. I haven't quite decided yet. It makes it sit a little bit lower on the finger. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to cut it a little bit long. So we want it to bend inwards a little bit like this so we can lay it in there. Just kind of like that. So we'll solder that one on, then I'll straighten it out, and we'll do the same thing we did over on the other ones. I may do one more after this, but then I'll probably do the rest of them off camera since I'm doing basically the same thing over and over again. I don't want you to get bored. But that's the process. So let's line this up and do that one. And like I said, you could flux these and then lay a little piece of solder on there if you want to. I just find it easier to do it this way anymore. The real trick with pick soldering, as you'll see if you watch that video, is not getting impatient and sticking your solder in too early. You really just need to wait until the metal reaches 1450, which is what this particular type of solder melts at. So I'm kind of watching the metal. You can watch the other solder joints. They start to get a little shiny, then we're close. Yeah. I jumped the gun a little bit on that one. I had to wait until it flowed. Okay, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and keep doing that all the way down. You probably don't need to watch the entire process. Then I'll be back when I'm done. Okay, it took a while, but I got those all soldered on there. I left off this one. I initially was going to put that one there in order to reach around to this side if I made it into an actual ring, but since I decided to make it into a partial ring that just mounts on the bottom of the head of the ring, I decided I probably didn't need that there. So let's just shape this into more of a ring shape. The trick is going to be to get it mounted just right. So one of the things I'm going to do in order to get that right is to file a flat spot on the top here. I'm going to kind of try to use the points of this kite shape as the central point of the band, and hopefully that'll get me pretty close, but that's what I'm going to do. And I think you could use hard silver sheet solder, but I'm getting tired and I don't want to screw this up. So let me use some easy paste solder. We won't tell anybody. Just kidding. There's nothing wrong with using paste solder. I used to have a bias against it for some reason, but not using it for a long time made me better at soldering, I think. But there are occasions where it's very useful. So. Alright, let's see if we can get that soldered down. I'm going to heat the base here a little bit more than I do the top because that's going to be the harder part to get hot. Doing sort of down the bottom. Alright, let's see if we got it on there. I'll cool it off for a second. Okay, we'll let that pickle, and one moment. I'm going to be using one of these liver of sulfur gels. I'll mix it with some warm water, and we'll let that sit in there after I get it mostly polished up. And then I'll do some light final polishing to try and keep as much of that in there as possible. But yeah, I'll be back in a few. Okay, I've got these put in here and I've got that oxidized. I ended up using some black max because the liver of sulfur stuff just wasn't giving me much, as much darkness as I'd like for that. So I do this a little differently than some people. I use my chain nose pliers, the edge of it, as a bezel pusher. So I've got this in there. I'm just going to push this up against the edge of that stone. After I get that pushed up, the last step I'm going to use this rounded outer edge to try and burnish that top edge there with the tube meat. Try and do that without slipping and scratching anything. Okay, so that's basically what I was shooting for. It's got that kind of cool random design in the band. I like it. I'm a little displeased with the oxidation, but I'm always a little displeased with the oxidation. I'd like something that actually evenly makes a nice black thing, and that sometimes is hard to get. So I'm going to clean it up a little bit more with a fine polishing wheel and the Dremel, and I'll get some pictures for it at the end. So. All right, well, that was the angular turquoise ring. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, make sure to hit the like button before you leave. And before you go, take a moment and visit my channel main page and check out some of the other videos that I have. I have almost 400 videos now. I've been producing them at 3 per week for the past 3 years or so, almost 3 years, I think. And so there's a whole lot of content there, and I think you'll find that no matter what skill level you're at, there might be something interesting there to stimulate some ideas. So check them out. Subscribe to my channel. Tell your friends. Have them subscribe to my channel. And before you leave, the other thing is check out the video description down below. There's some important links down there. If you want to get yourself one of those design idea books I talked about at the beginning, there's several different versions on my merch store, and there's a link in the description. There's also a link to my Patreon if you want to check that out. And there's a link to buy my ebook if you want to get that. It's a good way to navigate 2023's videos. So check those things out. Come back and visit again. Take care. Happy silversmithing.